I am here to request your favorable report also on House Bill 1091. This legislation expands the work also done by this committee and by the House of Delegates and the Senate in 2019 with the passage of the Ready to Read Act. Many of you were here, many of you were not. It was wonderful work that actually increased our screening and our ability to identify students very early on who had reading difficulties and address them directly. What this bill does is makes alterations to the original legislation to ensure that our educational system doesn't miss an opportunity to assist older children who are transfers to Maryland or English language learners if they are demonstrating reading difficulties. So the 2019 bill put regulations into place that required all schools in Maryland, public schools, to screen every kindergartner or first grader if they weren't in kindergarten in public school for reading difficulties, basically for dyslexia. It also requires schools, and this is already in law, to screen new students who transfer into that school during the elementary school years, who haven't been previously screened and who are experiencing reading difficulties. This bill does two things. One, it expands that group from children who are only transferring into schools during elementary school to those who are transferring into schools and also up to middle school age, so up to 8th grade, right? And this bill was brought to me originally by teachers who were teaching middle schoolers who said these kids had not ever been identified. So that was a group of concern. The second group of concern is a group of children who are English language learners and who are not able to be screened appropriately in their native language when they're in kindergarten or first grade because we don't have those screeners available in all of their languages. I know Padonia International School in my district has almost 60 different languages spoken among the students in that elementary school. So what this bill does is say that after that student has been established to have English language speaking and reading proficiency, right? So this is after they've gotten all the ESOL services and they are still exhibiting reading difficulties. We will screen them in English for dyslexia. Right? I want to be very clear that I am extremely thankful to my one unfavorable letter that you have in your packet. Okay, that came from MSCA. We did not speak about this bill at all until yesterday when I got the packet from somebody and went, oh my gosh, I must have made a terrible mistake. And in fact, I did. So I'm the first one to admit that this bill, actually, the language that I had written, did not do in the language of the bill what I just expressed to you that it would do. Right? That was my fault, and I appreciate MSEA meeting with me, pointing that out and saying what their concerns with the bill would be. So we sat down and I put in the amendment that's hopefully in front of all of you right now to address their concerns and to honestly make the bill do what I just said it would do, which was my intent all along. We all get tired and make mistakes, but I will be the first one to own it. I'll also be the first one to say thank you to the group that was willing to work with me to actually make this fit the needs of the students. So with all of that, I thank you for a favorable report on House Bill 1091. I hope that you will consider one. And this will ensure that all of our students, whether they were in kindergarten or first grade in Maryland, or not in kindergarten in Maryland, have equal and equitable access to the disability interventions that they need in order to learn to read. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I do believe I have some folks virtually with us.
Yes. First, Brianna January for 2 minutes, please. Brianna, you have like a wonderful name. It's like a superhero name. Every time I call you up, yeah, I'm just like, that's an awesome name.
I
is.
could not change it when I was married. There's just no way. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Honorable Committee. Brianna January on behalf of MACO in support of HB 1091 with amendments. Committee, counties agree strongly with the bill sponsor on the critical importance of healthy vision and vision screenings for the success of our students. And we have been engaged at the county level on various iterations of this bill and similar ones for a very long time. We are concerned a bit with the potentially significant fiscal impact of HB 1091 to schools and counties. The fiscal note does call that potentially significant. We're especially concerned by potentially challenging costs associated with increased supplemental reading instruction as a result of this bill. This could require hiring additional staff at a time when to be frank, in the field of education, as this committee well knows, it's very challenging to hire and retain our staff as it is. And while we're also significantly ramping up our blueprint funding. As such, MACO does suggest a simple amendment to require the state to provide supplemental aid via relevant blueprint resources or other resources to cover the costs that are associated with a mandated increase in just that supplemental reading instruction, not in additional screenings. We're perfectly fine with that, that do result from the bill. Counties are happy to work with the bill sponsor and committee on this bill and others like it to best serve Maryland students and to balance our county concerns. With that, we urge a favorable report with that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. January? Delegate Eversole.
So thank you for your testimony. I'm looking at the fiscal note and they're oblique about the amount they think this might cost. Has anybody done a cost analysis? Because if it's small, then I think, it'd be a great bill. And so maybe that's why they're hesitant. Do you have anything on that?
Thank you so much for that question, Delegate. This is exactly our concern as well. It's difficult to really gauge what this would require. It would be a different fiscal impact for each county. It would depend on a number of things, including the amount of students that are transferring from any grade level into our public school system, as well as any families that English is not their primary or first language spoken at home. And so right now that's really hard to gauge, but what we do know is that there could be a lot of staffing requirements added on, whether it be in school, additional supplemental reading instruction, whether it be out of school, post school, before school tutoring. We're just mostly concerned with that staffing element and what costs that might come with increasing staffing hours to do so at a time when our local schools are really struggling to hire and retain as it is.
It would really give us a chance to consider this seriously if we could get that
Yeah.
from someone. I love that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I read the MSEA's report. I haven't seen the amendment yet, but I'm having them check the email. I guess that would be where it would be most likely. Can you talk to me about how you would address it? If you have it, if you don't, I'll wait till I get the amendment. That's fine. Because one of the things I was going to say is the aspect at secondary schools, particularly our middle schools. I know when we talked a lot about dyslexia and how to actually identify and even treat going forward and continuing that process into the middle school years. A lot of the schools did not have the staff or the screening materials or the supplemental aids that they needed to teach the kids. So that was my question.
Sure, thank you for that question. I really appreciate it because I know you have some background in this, so that's particularly meaningful. Yeah, the Maryland State Education Association letter that you're referring to, first of all, their concerns were appropriate purely because my language wasn't where it needed to be. So the description that I gave you of the bill just now is with the amendment I worked out in the room with them. So that, and I'm not saying they have absolutely no concerns. I don't actually know because this all happened yesterday evening and we sat down and worked it out. But now the bill does what it was meant to do and what they were concerned with. Their argument here, and it's another reason that we took off high schoolers, right? Because we know, and I think what you're alluding to, is that there are good, simple, no or low cost no cost really screeners for kids up through 8th grade, but in high school it's a very difficult, more complicated situation because there are so many different comorbid that go into those difficulties that we really can't affect as much at that point. So this bill now, it was originally written to go up all the way through high school. Now it only goes up through middle school for that reason. The other thing was there was some misunderstanding about whether I was requesting that all students who moved in or transferred would be screened, or all students who had been identified as ESOL would be screened, and no, they are not. These are only those who transfer in who haven't had English as their first language and still are having learning difficulties, which legally our schools would be required to screen anyway, but it doesn't always happen. And then the third part of their letter is that they talk a lot about the English proficiency test that is given to students when they come into our schools with English as a second language. It's an excellent tool, but it does not evaluate for reading difficulties. What it does is evaluate the proficiency of that student only in English. So if that student is not performing well in English, they're automatically going to perform poorly in the reading disability section of that test, the WIDA. So what I'm saying is let's don't double diagnose kids. Let's don't use that at all to diagnose them with reading difficulties. All that diagnoses them with is English not being their first language. Right? Let's wait until they're actually considered proficient, which could be measured with this same tool later on. And if they're still not reading well, then we test for the actual problem, which is possibly dyslexia, maybe other things. So does that help? Okay.
Okay, we do have someone else signed up to testify virtually. Thank you, Ms. January, for being here today. Carlene Spittelnick. I hope I pronounced that right, but whenever you're ready, Ms. Spittelnick.
Okay. Chair Atterbury and members of the committee, I'm Arlene Spitolnik, and as a reading advocate and member of the Reading League Maryland and Decoding Dyslexia Maryland, I urge your support of House Bill 1091 with amendments. The Ready to Read Act, which was passed in 2019, established a prevention system in elementary schools to identify struggling readers before they fall behind. The act requires the screening of every kindergarten student using valid, reliable, and quick assessments to identify struggling readers and provide interventions for those who need it. Maryland is in the third year of implementing the Ready to Read Act, and I have heard teachers and administrators say struggling readers are receiving help and meeting grade level expectations in reading. However, many students still struggle with reading, particularly older, underserved students who were not screened in kindergarten. House Bill 1091 proposes to amend the Ready to Read Act to identify and provide help to students up to 8th grade who enter the school system after the universal kindergarten screening, as well as English learners up to the 8th grade. Screening English learners will help ensure that those who have learning difficulties, disabilities, or need more support for reading are not missed. Moreover, I'm suggesting an amendment that incorporates screening assessments that test skills that are predictive of reading success for grades 1 through 8. The Ready to Read Act currently only includes predictive reading skills for kindergarten students. Reading is the foundation for learning every subject in school. The Maryland Blueprint expects students to be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade, but that requires strong reading skills. House Bill 1091 will strengthen the Ready to Read Act so more students can master reading early. I urge you to support House Bill 1091 with proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Okay, seeing none, are there any other questions for Delegate Guyton? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1091.